Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. A lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And my gosh, have we got an absolute cracker on tonight, I have to tell you. Tonight, Michael Tellinger will be unpacking the system of slavery we are all facing, hidden under the mantle of fiat money and the global ambitions of the New World Order. What is fiat money, you may ask? Well, let me show you a short video that explains it. But first, let's remember that fiat money is not worth the paper it is printed on. Have a look at that. Remember the old Zim days? $100 trillion. That makes me a trillionaire. Yeah, that's fiat money for you. Alright, let's have a look at what is fiat money. I'm going to play the video and then we'll get Michael Tellinger on. Here we go.
Since 1971, when President Nixon took the United States off what was left of the gold standard, the world has operated under a system of money called fiat. The dollar, the pound, the euro are all government fiat currencies. Fiat is a Latin word meaning let it be so. It is the law that this government currency be money. Indeed, without that legal enforcement, and the fact that we must pay taxes in this money, that dollar bill or that computer digit that represents a dollar would be pretty much meaningless. Only the government has the power to issue fiat money, but banks can create it through lending. If somebody wants to borrow $10, a bank can create it from nowhere and lend it. It can then charge interest. Banks also create money by lending against an asset, such as a house. They're given the deeds to the house, and they create the money out of nowhere and lend it, at interest of course. Over the last 40 years, since this fiat system of money became the global norm, the supply of money has grown exponentially. In fact, we've seen the greatest growth in the supply of money in history. But who benefits? Of course, those that have the power to issue money, governments and banks. They haven't had to do anything productive, they just create money. Then those companies and individuals that get this money early. They can spend it before the prices of the things they want to buy have risen to reflect the new money in circulation. In other words, they get services, products, assets cheap. But prices soon rise. So holders of assets such as shares or houses will then see gains, without there necessarily being any improvements to the company or house in question. Often, this can lead to speculative bubbles. Who gets this money early? However money is created, be it through lending, fractional reserve banking, financial bailouts, or old-fashioned money printing, banks are always at or near the top of the money-issuing pyramid. Next come corporations who borrow large sums, those on lucrative government contracts for new ventures, particularly overseas, banks' associate companies and partners, those that borrow early and at low rates, and the bank's senior employees. They all quickly get their share of the pie. In some cases, this will come in the form of bonuses. But what about those at the bottom of the pyramid? Those on fixed wages or incomes, those who live in remote areas, or those with savings? By the time this newly created money has filtered down to them, the prices of the things they want to buy have increased. Their savings buy them less, however, and their wages remain largely unchanged. In some cases, they have to take on debt just to be able to afford the things they were previously able to buy, which means they have to go back to the banks. In reality, this process of creating money only redistributes wealth from the bottom to the top of the pyramid, and thus that ever-increasing gulf between rich and poor gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
Hi, Michael.
Hello, Scott.
How are you, mate?
Can you see me?
I can indeed. Wow, big subject
Excellent.
tonight.
Very well, nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, yours too, mate, yours too. We have a big subject tonight, don't we?
Yeah, we do. Well, a number of topics that we should discuss because they're all very relevant to our lives, to our times.
Yeah.
And to the ongoing growth of knowledge and rising consciousness among the people around the world, waking up, realizing what's going on. So yeah, definitely.
Okay, now tonight we're going to be talking about money. And just to get to the very starting point, tell us about the banking system around the world. How does it work?
Well, the banking system that we know is a very tightly controlled business. It really is a business that is controlled by a very small group of people. It's become known as the Rothschild banking empire, and it's pretty much what I call the largest organized crime syndicate on earth. And I know people often get a shock when they hear me say it for the first time, especially people that haven't really given any thought. But the banking industry and the banking families have tied up the entire world with their banking system, and there's very little we can do to escape it. So just for people to understand, money is not something that evolved over thousands of years from bartering and trading, and I'll come back to that.
Right.
Money is something that just suddenly appeared. It appeared at a very specific time in human history as a complete and fully evolved ideology and philosophy and an event in human history. And we need to talk about that because that's really important for people to digest. But the current global banking system is controlled by the Rothschilds banking empire, with the exception, I must say, because often I forget to add it afterwards, and then people think I don't know what I'm talking about. With the exception of a few countries, mainly China, Russia, North Korea, Cuba. Until recently, there were countries like Iraq, Iran, Libya, Afghanistan, Syria, and a few others. And when you start naming those countries, you realize what the agenda has been over the last several decades, and
with the wars
very
and so
much
on.
to bring. Exactly. So the wars were never about weapons of mass destruction or anything like that. And we can go into that in more detail as well. But so I think for people to understand this is that every country's financial systems and banking industry is controlled by what is referred to as the central bank or the Reserve Bank. In South Africa, it's the South African Reserve Bank. In the USA, it's the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, and it's the Bank of England, and the Reserve Bank of Australia, and so forth, the Reserve Bank of India. So these central banks that control everything to do with money in that country are private institutions. It's a private organization, a private institution that does not fall under the jurisdiction or the legal systems of that country. This is a huge shock for people when they first discover this. And this is why it is such a scam. And it is a complete and utter scam that's been pulled over our eyes, and we've been forced into it. And until we find a way to get out of it, which we have, by the way, until we find a way to get out of it, it's very difficult to navigate and exist under these conditions. So the reason why, all these central banks basically dictate the financial and fiscal policies to the countries, to the governments. Now, how is that possible? It's possible because that's how the Rothschild banking empire has taken control of the world. They wangle their way into each country. They topple the leader, the president, or the prime minister. They bribe them, they threaten them, they extort them, or they come and do deals where they basically steal the country from its people. They work with other organizations like the World Health Organization, the United Nations, the World Trade Organization. And these are all instruments of the Rothschild banking empire that are very neatly disguised as organizations and institutions that are there to help the countries. It's exactly the opposite. They come there, they under the pretense of helping, and then they take everything.
Just on that particular point, I've noticed that Morgan Stanley, which is obviously a Rothschild division, seems to have all its top people running the European Union. They seem to be in all the key positions in the European Union. If you look at the White House, you seem to have everybody is associated with Morgan Stanley. How does that work? Is this how they're actually getting into the governments around the world?
Yeah, there's a great book for people that want to find out about the nitty-gritty details and the fact that this is an organized crime syndicate. Is Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Oh yes, I've heard of that. Yeah,
it's a phenomenal book because that's what he did for many years. He was a hitman, an economic hitman for the United States banking industry, and he would go to countries and wine and dine them and make them promises and offer them this and that, and then eventually get the president or the leader who was naive and ignorant hooked in, and before they knew, the country was sold, gone. And South Africa is a great example. I think South Africa is one of the greatest examples of how our South African Reserve Bank, which is one of the most powerful and wealthiest reserve banks in the world, central banks in the world, because of all our minerals that we have. It's incredible how much the South African Reserve Bank contributes to the Rothschilds banking empire, immense wealth and control. So that's how they take control of the governments. They put in their puppet masters. They do exactly what they want them to do. And this is why we seemingly can never get out of this trap. And just for people to realize, the only reason that we pay any tax, levies, VAT, any taxes and inflation, why we have inflation, is not because we are stupid and we don't know what we should do with money and how we should use money for the benefit of the people and the benefit of our country and how it should help, expand our abilities and science and technology, which is what it should be doing. And for some reason, it does not do that. It's an illusion of doing that, but all those things always get shut down, and none of these great innovative and technologies and inventions are ever released to really help humanity. And that is because, like I mentioned right up front, is that the central bank is a private corporation, a private entity that functions outside of the legal jurisdiction of that country. It is protected by the army of that country because the president or the leader or the government is really a puppet of the Rothschild banking empire. So they use the army and the military of that country, especially the United States, which has been done for the last 100 years since 1913, the launch of the Federal Reserve Bank.
Right.
And then they use the military might of that country to protect the interests and to protect that central bank or that reserve bank. So no one can ever have a go at it. And you can't have a go at the central bank in the constitutional court, because the bank's constitution does not fall under the legislation or the control of the constitution of that country. It is a spectacular deception and fraud committed against the people of every country.
So just to summarize, what you're saying, Michael, is that if you thought the South African Reserve Bank was owned by the government of South Africa, that's a huge mistake, because it's owned by private individuals.
Exactly. This is a big thing. So there's a big difference when we talk about a people's bank, which is owned by the people and controlled on behalf of the people by a government of the people. That's a very different thing. And the current banking system, which is a central bank, which is controlled by the Rothschild empire in the city of London, and the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, from where they run this entire global scam. But we'll talk about that in a second.
Right.
So there's a big difference, a huge difference. The two shall never meet, because a people's bank is literally a bank that was created by the people. It's an idea that issues paper money or money as a tool to enhance and grow the economy and help people to improve their lives, improve their country for the benefit of the country and everyone, and that doesn't have to carry any inflation, doesn't have to carry any taxes or any interest rates, none of that.
Right. And
there have been several countries in the last 120 years or so, or maybe a bit more, that have had these people's banks that were incredibly successful. And because of their success, they became a big threat to the Rothschild empire, and they were very quickly and cleverly invaded, often without any fanfare. They don't want to make too much news about it in most cases, and before you know it's in the hands of the Rothschilds. So this is the state of the world right now, and it's we need to get out of that if we want to create a new world free from economic slavery, free from financial slavery, and create a new world in which we can really start creating communities of prosperity and abundance. But before we can get out of it, people need to understand what's going on and why these central banks are so lethal and so brutal to our liberties.
Now, when we talk about the central banks, apparently in the last few weeks there's been a major change happened in the US, where Trump has basically taken the Federal Reserve away from the private shareholders, and now he said, no, this is my game. I'm going to look after this now. Is that correct? What's happened there?
Yeah, this is one of the biggest stories in the last 250 years. And I did a video, quite a detailed video about it, about three weeks ago or so.
Right.
And that's just had a huge response from people all over the world. I just posted a new video today or last night as a follow-up to that video where Trump takes over the Federal Reserve Bank of the USA. Before I get there, just so people, in case we missed this, in case people are missing this. So the reason why this is such a big problem is because our countries are borrowing money. Think about this. This is how evil this is.
Yeah.
Our countries, our governments are borrowing money from an independent organization called the Central Bank or the Reserve Bank, that operates outside of the country. So the bank is here, the country is here, and we're borrowing money from this institution. We have no control over this institution, but we can't knock it over because our military protects it. It's just insane.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
Now, just talking about that money, just talking about that money that countries borrow. The difference is if the South African Reserve Bank, for example, was nationalized, there wouldn't be interest being paid. But because it's going to private individuals, the country is paying taxes which cover the interest on that money that's been borrowed, and that money goes back to this cabal, the Rothschilds.
Yeah. So that's exactly what it is. So the country is borrowing money from this company here called the Reserve Bank or the Central Bank, and they're charging us interest for the money they lend us. So, I mean, why would anybody or any country ever agree to that kind of situation? Of course they would not. So the only reason that this is going on, because they hold us to ransom, they hold the people of the country to ransom by controlling and manipulating the government and those puppet leaders that they've put in place, that are actually their agents and their spies, their agents. So this is a terrible thing. So, and this is why, by the way, if you go, I just recommend that people go online and find my video on my YouTube channel and watch that video. It's 20 minutes or so. That gives you the details of how Donald Trump took over the Reserve Bank of the USA and how it works. But we'll go through it here. We'll go through it here as well in detail. So
fantastic.
So people really get it. So basically, if you go back and look at all the major assassinations and wars and initiations of wars that started, it's always funded by the Rothschild banking empire.
Yes.
And this is why many people say all wars are bankers' wars, right? And this has become quite a famous statement. And if you just follow the money, that's really what you got to do, is follow the money, and you'll see very quickly how this is manipulated on a scale that is just unbelievable to most people. So if you go back, some examples that I quote in the video is like President Andrew Jackson in the USA. He created a whole new money supply in the USA that literally neutralized the Rothschilds, and USA was completely free of any debt. Right. And that was obviously not good for their global banking control. So they tried to assassinate him. They didn't succeed. Then we have obviously Abraham Lincoln, that was killed because of sidelining the Rothschild empire with his greenback, and again making money affordable and available to everyone, and once again made America a debt-free country. Then we have the launch of the First World War, when Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated in Sarajevo in 1914, and that sparked the First World War. And that was orchestrated by the bankers, the Rothschild assassins that they send out. And that sparked the First World War, from which the Rothschild profited, and obviously profited immensely. Yeah. And the reason they assassinated him is because he didn't want to give in to their control of the banking in Central Europe. Then we have, just after the First World War, the Russian Tsar Nikolai Romanov, and his beautiful family that were murdered in the basement of some country house, as many people are aware of, by the Bolshevik revolution invasion, the Rothschild-funded Bolshevik invasion and communist revolution that covered all of Russia at that stage. Obviously, that took control of Russia under Lenin and Trotsky and all those disgusting human beings. Because Tsar Romanov, Nikolai didn't want to play ball with the Rothschilds, so they just killed him and his whole family, and that sparked the Russian Revolution of 1918. And then we have
Michael. Look at John F. Kennedy. I mean, he brought out the silver-backed dollar, and within weeks of that, he was assassinated.
Yeah, John F. Kennedy was obviously the next one. The big one that tried to do what Donald Trump has managed to do now. And it's really important for people to draw those lines and recognize what JFK was trying to do was exactly what Donald Trump has succeeded in doing now. And people say, well, how come it's not in the news? No one's talking about it. We'll talk in great detail about it. But the bottom line basically is that all the mainstream media in the world, all the mainstream news networks, and from Disney to
all controlled,
Fox to CNN to just all the big news networks. I can't think of their names now. Are all controlled and owned by the Rothschild Empire once again. So they're not going to go out and announce to everybody that they've just lost the largest central bank that they own in the world, the Federal Reserve Bank of the United States, has just been taken from them, without firing a shot, without any resistance or violence. Well, you wouldn't say that if you look at the streets in the United States right now.
Do you think that's behind it? Because I know Soros is behind Antifa.
Yes, well, that actually is behind it, but now we getting lost a little bit. So we're going to come back.
Let's come back to that,
Why this anti-Trump sentiment is so, it's reached such a climax and such an unbelievably excruciating, unimaginable height that everything is just pointed at Trump.
Yeah.
And when you realize why that is, it's because of what I've just mentioned, is that he's taken over the central bank of the United States.
Now, I've got to ask the elephant in the room question. Why hasn't Trump been assassinated?
Well, it's a very important question, and I hope that he has some higher spiritual protection. There has to be something else going on here, and again, that was even during his election. Something happened that was not possible. It's just simply not possible. Because if you think about the election in South Africa and in every other country is completely and utterly controlled. This is why it's called a free and fair election, and your vote is a secret. Nobody knows who you voted for. That is not a good thing. That's a very, very bad thing, because that means the votes can be completely and utterly manipulated. You can never check whether your name has been put next to the candidate you voted for. That means it is completely and utterly open to fraud by those who control the election monster.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And I speak with a great amount of experience, because for some of your viewers that may know, I was involved in South African politics for about 8 years, where I ran with the Ubuntu Party. And we were very, very popular. Let me tell you what, we were very, very popular. We probably caused many meetings in the chambers of Parliament and in the ANC quarters, because at the rate that our popularity grew was unbelievable. I mean, I had 1 million signed up members that are still on this laptop of mine with names and phone numbers. And that's just people that signed up, not those that supported us that didn't sign up.
Right.
Right. So, but let's go back to I lost my train of thought now. The elections are completely and utterly rigged.
Right.
And our participation in the South African elections, 2012, 2014, when I ran for president, believe it or not, and 2016 gave me that inside information where it was made very, very clear to me by certain events that happened that it is completely utterly rigged, and the amount of votes that are put out there are predetermined and planned. So the same happens in the USA, the same happens in every other country.
Even in Australia.
And so when Trump won the elections, there was a shock through the entire establishment that is controlled by the Rothschilds and all the large corporations. And Hillary Clinton, who was the queen, the goddess of that left-wing banking cartel, she didn't win. That was a shock. And how is that possible? And this is why they were so upset. Because they weren't upset because Trump had won. They were upset because they lost. Their mechanism that they have complete and utter control over had failed them.
Right.
How is that possible? And this is why they launched an attack on Trump virtually immediately. From the moment he was elected, they already started to pull out all the stops to either have him impeached or have him resign or something, some dirt on him.
Well, Schiff and Pelosi and the Democrat Party, they've been trying to have him impeached since day one, haven't they?
Yeah. So what is really important for people to recognize, what is going on in the Democratic Party in the USA right now, and as painful as it is, because there are good people in the Democratic Party. Let's be very clear about this. There are a lot of good people in the Democratic Party. I mean, JFK was a Democrat after all, right? So JFK tried to do what Donald Trump is doing now, and he failed. They killed him because at the time there was no social media. He couldn't build up a huge national network of supporters, of people that supported him the way that Trump has done it. So they just quickly eliminated him without making too much fanfare about what he had done about the central bank. And very quickly things went back to normal under their control. But the whole Pelosi and Schiff and Schumer, all those, It's exactly the same tactic that they use to infiltrate every other government and every other president or leader of other countries. They've had control of the USA for all these years, from 1913 all the way through up till JFK, and then he caused big problems for them, so they got rid of him, and since then they've had absolute control of it again. So it's an absolute Bolshevik, Zionist, Rothschild-funded invasion of the United States.
Right.
There's no question about it. The tactics they use are exactly the same. The media is the voice and the face that just destroys the opponent in the mind and the eyes of the people, because they don't know. They believe what they see on TV. They believe that CNN tells you that Trump is a rapist. They'll believe it, you know.
Right.
So it's really important for people to recognize. When you see, so this is, try and look at this from a perspective of knowing who owns these networks. If you see, and when you see all the mainstream media going like rabid dogs after someone and trying to destroy them in the media, then you must immediately know that there's an agenda behind it, and that person is a big threat or a potential threat to the Rothschild empire, and they're using the media to neutralize, eliminate, or completely destroy that individual or that corporation. And this has happened with people like Michael Jackson. Prince even fell victim to it.
Yeah.
And obviously Kennedy was the main president.
Which is
why what you mentioned.
Which is why the alternative media is so important, because it gives a different perspective. Sorry, carry on.
Yeah, but I want to come back to what you said, Scott, about JFK. So just what we mentioned to people already. Donald Trump has managed to wrestle away the Federal Reserve Bank from the Rothschilds. It is now completely under his control, right? I'm going to go into details why I can say so and why that is the case. And that's, by the way, why he has access to all this money. Why he's been able to, raise $3 billion and another $2 billion and trillion, another couple of trillion here.
Yeah.
And because he's basically in control of the Federal Reserve Bank of the USA.
Right.
So, and we need to come back again. If I get sidetracked, we need to come back to, where do these central banks get all their money from?
Yes.
Because people need to understand how this works. Where do these central banks get all their money from?
Fiat money.
How come they have all this money stashed away somewhere that they can lend to our countries, to our governments, that we borrow from them? How come we can't create our own money, but they have all this money? Why are they so special? Right. So, well, maybe we should cover that while we're talking about it right now.
Go ahead.
So it's very important to know they don't have anything. Okay, they have nothing. They have some gold reserves that they've stolen from the various countries. Where that gold is remains a big mystery, because that is a big secret. They don't really want people to raid their gold. But that's really got nothing to do with anything, because the gold is probably not even used for things that we imagine the gold is used for. But they really just have the right that they've assigned to themselves to create money and to control the distribution of money to all countries. And this is why they institute their central bank, and they create a global, complicated network of rules, regulations, acts and bills and all these things, and they control the legal systems in the countries without being subject to those same laws.
Yeah.
And this is how they just create money out of thin air. In essence, that's what it comes down to. But they make it look, through their very complicated and convoluted financial legalities and bonds and government bonds and all these things that they create, these financial instruments, they call them negotiable instruments, and these financial instruments that they create, that they float on the stock markets, or they issue bonds to governments, or the government issues a bond to the Reserve Bank, and in return they get so much and then they enslave the people, because a bond does really mean bondage, right? So if you issue a government bond to the central bank, you're basically enslaving your people, and you offering the central bank a company which has got nothing. You're offering the slave and the sweat and the hard labor of your people to pay back something that was created out of nothing. This is the highest crime and the most unimaginable crime that's ever been committed against humanity. And this is why we need to get out of it.
Right.
So JFK was trying to get out of it.
Yeah.
And if you look at some of the statements that JFK made, literally a few days, 30 days to a few days before he died, he made it very clear in his speeches that the country was under threat and the liberties of the people were under threat by invisible organizations and corporations that operated under night, whose secrets are hidden, never spoken about, and I can't remember the speeches exactly, but and then he said that there is a plot against every man, woman, and child, and to enslave every man, woman, and child in the USA. And before I leave this noble office, I will expose this plot and the perpetrators. And then a week later, he's shot dead in Dallas.
Yeah.
So what JFK did, in essence, without having the media to talk to, he couldn't go to the media and say, wow, this is what's going on. We're being enslaved by the central bank, because the media is owned by the same people that own the central bank.
Yeah.
So he couldn't run to the media.
Yeah.
And he didn't have Facebook or Twitter or social media or YouTube like we have today. So what he did, he literally just started to print a new form of money called the United States note. And those are available on the internet. You can go and have a look, and you'll see that it was his special law that he passed, legislation that he passed, that allowed the United States to print their own money. And that must have just sent absolute nightmares through the Rothschild empire at the time, and they plotted to take him out and eliminate him.
Wow.
Without turning him into a bad guy, because he was so loved and so revered and so respected.
Yeah.
So it had to be some communist plot. It had to be somebody to try and overthrow the freedom and the liberty of the United States. And yet at the same time, it was the same guys that invaded Russia, same guys that started the First World War, same guys that killed what's his name, Lincoln, and Andrew Jackson and Franz Ferdinand, and by the way, also in South Africa. Just 3 years. This is very important for South Africans to digest this information. Very, very important. Only 3 years after JFK was killed by the Rothschild banking empire, Hitman and assassins, and within 2 weeks or so after they killed him, basically with immediate effect, the Federal Reserve took control of the creation and the printing of the money. And if you look at the money in the USA at that stage, it went from saying United States note, it went back to saying Federal Reserve note, Federal Reserve Bank note.
Right.
That's the difference. So that's when you see the difference between the notes printed by JFK. It says United States note, and then when the Fed took it back, it says Federal Reserve note.
Right. Now,
3 years after this happened.
Let's go back in history a bit and look at the origins of money and how the Rothschilds took over the entire financial monetary system. Do you want to take us through that story? Yeah,
absolutely. But this is just really important for South Africans watching it.
Right.
So I'll end with this. Basically 3 years, in September 1966, South African Prime Minister Hendrik Verwoerd was assassinated. Now, everybody thinks that it was a hate crime. It was because of apartheid. Just like everybody thinks that guy called Lee Harvey Oswald shot JFK and was a Russian agent. These are the same lies that were spun to South Africans and to the rest of the world. The same situation was happening in South Africa. Hendrik Verwoerd, and this is probably very new information to most South Africans, Hendrik Verwoerd was preparing a plan to do what JFK had done in the United States.
Oh, wow.
Keep in mind that South Africa in 1966 was reported by Newsweek and all those kind of magazines as the most prosperous country in the world.
Right.
In 1966, and for a whole decade and more. And this was the Prime Minister, the leader of the most prosperous country in the world, with the highest gold reserves, diamonds, platinum, all the things that we have here in South Africa, was about to shut out the Rothschild empire. That would not have been good. That means that South Africa would have been overnight become the most powerful country in the world and would have dictated the global financial markets. This is really important for people to understand and digest this, how big a deal this was. South Africa, with immediate effect, would have dictated and controlled the financial markets of the world by taking control of the South African Reserve Bank, the way that JFK did and the way that Donald Trump has just succeeded in doing. So they obviously couldn't allow that to happen. So they created this hate crime, and they stuck a knife in his heart and let him bleed to death. And they left the stain on the carpet there for 30 years or whatever it was, as a warning to any other incumbent prime minister or president to say, you don't do that. This is our territory. We control this territory. This is our bank, our central bank. You do as we say. Otherwise, we get rid of you. So, very important for people to know, the Hendrik Verwoerd assassination had nothing to do with apartheid. It was just another elimination of a leader of a country who did not want to play ball with the Rothschild banking empire. So, this is why Donald Trump taking control of the Federal Reserve Bank without any violence, any fanfare, any major bloodshed or resistance, just bringing it into the government, bringing it under the Department of Treasury, that's all he did. And now Steve Mnuchin, the Secretary of the Treasury, is basically in charge of the Fed. Powell, what's his name? The head of the Fed. He's still the head of the chairman of the Fed, but he's literally just the gatekeeper and the face of the Fed. Basically, the Fed is doing whatever Trump tells them, and this is just a spectacular story.
Isn't Mnuchin a Morgan Stanley man?
I'm not sure.
I think he is.
He was. He might be, but keep in mind that Jerome Powell, the chairman of the Fed, was appointed by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Right. And then the other thing that happened immediately after the Fed was brought into the Department of Treasury in the USA, that means the government has control of it. Right. So nothing changes. I mean, keep in mind that the Federal Reserve Bank building is on United States territory. It's on the land of the people.
Right.
So they just took what is theirs and what's on their land and in their country, and it now belongs to the people under the control of the sitting president, who clearly understands what's going on, clearly understands how the financial markets work, and has realized that by doing this, he takes control of the creation and the distribution of money in the United States.
Right.
So by example, what Donald Trump has done, he showed every other global leader and president to do the same. Right. How they can just simply take their reserve bank and bring it into their Treasury Department or whatever department manages their funds and the creation of money and the distribution of money. And literally the entire global banking empire that has taken 250 years through blood, sweat, tears, torture, warfare, extortion, murder, just unimaginable crimes against humanity committed by the Rothschild banking empire, suddenly, without any bloodshed, it can all diffuse. And why is that? How is that possible? It's because the moment the president or the leader of that country takes the central bank under the control of the government, then the army and the military, as long as he's got control of the military and the army, obviously the leader, and that army and the military is not controlled by some external forces, they need to be on side of the president and the leader, right, so that the military won't overthrow the government to protect the independent central bank, which has happened many times, obviously. Right. So this can happen right across the world, and I believe if just a few countries, especially first world countries, if a few more first world countries just literally do that and bring the central bank into the government and cut out the Rothschilds, the military does not oppose it, the military supports the leader, that's the end of the Rothschild banking empire. They cannot fight it. They don't have any armies. The only way they can fight it is by doing what they're doing in the USA right now.
Yeah, it's crazy that this situation has actually, evolved. Because to have a family controlling the entire global monetary system is just ridiculous. I mean, it takes away the whole idea of a democracy.
Well, even democracy, the word democracy is just a twisted word, and we, I don't like to use the word democracy, because the idea and the philosophy of democracy was actually built with slavery and built on the blood, sweat, and tears and the lives of slaves in Greece. So democracy is tainted. The foundations of democracy are not good.
Right.
So this is why I keep coming back. Once we've discussed all these things and we talk about the negative stuff or the horrible stuff, I keep reminding people that, remember, there is a very bright light at the end of this dark and gloomy tunnel, and that's called contributionism, and one small town will change the world.
Right.
And we can touch upon that, because we did speak about it last time.
Absolutely.
We can touch upon that.
Now, let's get back to the origins of money, so that people understand how the Rothschilds actually took over the financial system.
Well, the Rothschilds really used a very, very ancient financial system that was basically introduced to humanity thousands of years ago. So it's not something that happened a few hundred years ago or during the Rothschilds. There was already a plan, and an evolved plan, and a mechanism by which money was used and controlled for literally thousands of years. And this is what most people do not know. The Rothschilds took that plan and they perfected it. I don't know how they did this. This was clearly a masterstroke. Meyer Amschel Rothschild, this German Jewish banking, the foundation of it, which is, this is unfortunately the thing, and it's these Jewish bankers that have just taken control of the world with the Rothschilds, under the control of the Rothschilds. And when I said Jewish, it's there's a big difference here between Jewish, Zionist, and Khazar, and so forth. So that opens a whole nother wormhole and a rabbit hole that one can go down, because it also helps to explain many of the problems and the hiccups that we've faced in the world because of this group of people that impose themselves on humanity.
Right.
So he really took an ancient ideology, an ancient philosophy that was fully evolved when it was first introduced to humanity, and he perfected it. He really took it and he adapted it to the modern life, modern world in the 1760s, and that's where the Rothschild banking empire was really created by Meyer Amschel Rothschild, the founding father of the Rothschild banking empire. And he sent out his 5 sons, I forget their names now, and he sent it to the 5 big cities of Europe. Yeah. And that's where they established the first Rothschild banks, and started to control and manipulate the countries, the governments, the leaders. And literally within 100 years, they controlled Europe, they controlled the world. And that's when they set their sights on the United States. So by 1913...
Just on that point with the Rothschild sons who were sent to these major centres, it was N.M. Rothschild who was sent to the UK to set up the family business there. And if anyone who lives in Kimberley who's watching this, you can go to the Kimberley Museum where the big hole of Kimberley is, and you will see the actual cheque, or it's a copy of the cheque that was written to Cecil Rhodes by N.M. Rothschild. It's over £1 million, and it was the money he needed to buy out all the small tenants, on that big hole of Kimberley. That's how he was able to buy the whole mine, was because of money that came from the Rothschilds. And the check, a copy of the check is actually in that museum, so you can go and have a look at the Kimberley Museum, the big hole, and you'll see the check. Sorry, back to you.
Yeah. No, that's good. Thanks for bringing that up, because this is what, and then you see how Cecil John Rhodes was just an instrument of the Rothschilds, who was sent here to Southern Africa to lock down Southern Africa for the crown, and the crown being not the queen. The queen is just the current holder of the crown. The crown is the Crown Temple on the River Thames, which is the home from which the Rothschild banking empire basically took their knowledge and understanding of the control of money. And that goes back to the Templars, that goes to the building of the temple in Jerusalem. Oh my God, this is a story that goes back for thousands of years. But I'm going to go back to the first origins of money, because that is a phenomenal story. So if people think that this is something that just happened and evolved, that money just evolved over thousands of years because we used pieces of paper and promissory notes and all that, and eventually it turned to money because it's a thing that helped society to evolve and become stable and successful, absolutely not. So just remove that from your thoughts immediately, because that's what they want you to think. They want all of humanity to believe that money is important, money is necessary, that without money there's no progress, and money is the driver of invention and so forth, and money makes the world go round, okay, which is absolutely not true, because you realize that on its own money does nothing.
Yeah.
People do everything, right? You can put $1 million on the table, it'll do nothing until people get off their asses and actually do something. So money did not evolve out of thousands of years of bartering and trading, but most people actually believe that because that's what we were taught in our schools, in the education systems, through all the universities and the economic schools and the financial schools and all the faculties of finance and economics and all that. And those are all the instruments and the propaganda of the powerful, ever-present, all-invasive Rothschild banking empire that has their tentacles and their claws in everything we do, from the first breath we breathe when we are born to the last breath we breathe out. Our lives are controlled and manipulated by this global, bloodthirsty crime syndicate called the Rothschild banking empire, with the exception of China, Russia, and one or two other countries, and we can talk about that if there's time.
Right. Now, just talking about time, I have put a 2-hour limit on this because you've had a big day, and I will totally respect that. We're getting close to 50 minutes into the conversation, so you take us through the next stage of this whole thing.
Well, let's talk about the origins of money. So,
yes.
So I trust by now people understand. So, or maybe before we go through the origins of money, let's just first sketch a 5-minute breakdown of the absolute control, right?
Right.
So the head crown control of the Rothschild empire sits in the City of London. City of London is not London.
It's owned by the Rothschilds.
Exactly. It's an independent square mile at the heart of London, on the River Thames, where the temple is. And where all those big fancy skyscrapers are in London at the moment. That's the banking center, right?
Yeah.
And you see when you ride the subway, the subway in London, you go through all those, like Bank and Temple and so there are all these stations there, these subways that stop there in the City of London. And that's where the global banking empire is controlled. That's where all the stock markets are controlled from. They completely and utterly manipulate all the stock markets, the currency exchange rates, everything is controlled from the City of London.
And they have their own police force. Do not think
for 1 second. I beg your pardon?
They have their own police force.
Yes, they have their own police force. They have their own mayor. There's a mayor of the City of London. There's a whole very complex protocol how you can get elected to the mayor of the City of London. Even when the Queen comes to visit, or anybody else comes to visit the mayor of the City of London, there's a whole protocol and special permits that you have to get. It's ridiculous. When people start to research the City of London, it sends shivers up your spine, and you realize the depth of control.
Right.
And most people are still naively and ignorantly thinking that the stock markets of the world are just natural. They just move organically as people buy and sell stocks. If you think that, then you clearly have no idea how ruthless and brutal and bloodthirsty this Rothschild banking empire is.
It's awful.
They have everything in control. Do you think for 1 second that the largest business in the world, called the Rothschild banking empire, that controls all other businesses on earth for the past 250 years, do you think for 1 second they would leave that to chance by fluctuating markets and things happen naturally and organically? They would leave that to chance? Absolutely not. The entire global banking industry, all the stock markets, all the currency fluctuations and exchanges are controlled meticulously, minute by minute, hour by hour, day by day, from the City of London.
Right.
And again, the reason I say this is because I've spoken to people that have escaped that, people that worked in those rooms, I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but let me just tell you that everything is completely and utterly controlled.
Right. Okay.
There are no accidents. What happens in the financial markets and the stock markets of the world.
Right. Let's get to the origins of money.
So, the first time we hear about money is in the Sumerian clay tablets. And for people that know anything about the Sumerian Empire, people that don't know about it, let me quickly sketch a little bit of background. The Sumerian Empire was a very powerful empire that lasted for several thousand years, not a few hundred years, several thousand years, in what we today call Mesopotamia, or the Near East, and the Middle East and Near East. It's pretty much where modern-day Iraq was. Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and all those places in the Middle East that would have been known as the Sumerian Empire. And some of the earliest awareness or knowledge, or let's put it this way, the largest written record of human history that we have available to us today, we get from the translations of the Sumerian clay tablets. And this is a huge revelation for people that start to study ancient human history, origins of humankind, mythology, religion, and so forth. Because it's in the Sumerian tablets that all of these threads of our history and our knowledge, religions, mythology, ancient civilizations, technology, etc., the biblical stories, the flood, the creation of Adam, and all of these stories come together and converge in the Sumerian tablets.
Right.
It is quite spectacular. So when we start reading, and just so people know, there are millions of these clay tablets. It's not just one or two or a few hundred that have been found. Millions have been gathered and collected. There are millions in existence. Hundreds of thousands of these have been collected. They live and exist in store rooms in museums around the world, mostly the British Museum, the French museums, and all the first world museums of the world have huge collections of these Sumerian tablets. They've also employed many translators and experts to translate these, and there have been many independent translators and experts that have also done their own work on translations of these. And it's from these independent translators that we actually get most of the critical information, because some of the encoded and disturbing information that we get from the translators that are controlled by the institutions like the British Museum, that information will never be released. And again, I say that because I know this from having spoken to some of these translators and the conditions under which they worked when they were working on some of these translations. Just those stories alone send shivers up your spine. How they control and manipulate history, and how they use archaeology and historical discoveries to manipulate political agenda today. It's ridiculous, and it's all driven by money, obviously, always. So some of these Sumerian texts are known as the Sumerian Kings Lists. And these Sumerian clay tablets, these are basically clay tablets that have all these little imprints on them. They're called cuneiform texts. The first form of writing on those was cuneiform, these little wedges that were used to indicate letters and numbers and so forth. And so on these clay tablets, some of these clay tablets go back, 4,000 BC, and these clay tablets tell us that the Sumerian civilization got their knowledge from a time before time. They keep repeating this. So they tell us that there was a time and a civilization that lived before the Sumerians, from where they got their knowledge and information from that was handed down to them. It's really important to digest that, to see how far back this goes. And among some of these clay tablets are tablets that have been discovered and deciphered that have sent shockwaves through historians and archaeologists, because it rattles the cage of a lot of what we hold firmly and believe to do with certain religions.
Right.
That may not necessarily be so. So some of these tablets are known as the Kings Lists, and these Kings Lists give us a long explanation or names of kings that ruled certain parts of the world, how long they lived, where they ruled, how long they ruled for, and they named these kings. And some of these kings lists name dozens of kings, and some of these kings, if you add up the time that they ruled, goes to close to 250,000 years, 240,000 years.
Wow.
And many of these kings that they mention in these Sumerian clay tablets live for 30,000 years, or 28,000 years, or 12,000 years, or they rule for 28,000 years. They live for much longer. They rule for 20,000 years. Very large numbers, long periods that these guys ruled for. So we have to start thinking about these kings and these beings that are not necessarily human.
Right.
There were some other entities and some other beings that lived a lot longer. But then we know from the Bible and other ancient texts that people in ancient times actually lived a lot longer than we live today. And that's not because people were stupid, they didn't know what a year was. No, that's modern scientists that try and shove that kind of nonsensical stupidity down our throats. That they knew exactly what was going on. It's just a different time, different situation, different biology, different genetics. And again, we can go down that rabbit hole, maybe down it with another discussion, because there's a lot to discuss there.
Yeah.
So some of these kings lists also tell us that there was a time when kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven. This is very, very important in all of human history that we know, especially related to the royal bloodlines. Because when we read these Sumerian texts and they say that during this period, kingdom was lowered to earth from heaven, and the first priest kings were appointed by the gods to rule over humanity. That gives us a very specific time in history when we see the appearance of the first royal bloodlines and the first priest kings that were appointed by the gods, these other beings that lived for these thousands of years. And then these priest kings themselves had special powers. They had special weapons of mass destruction. They themselves had knowledge of magic and sorcery and wizardry, and had special weapons of mass destruction with which they could smite people if the people didn't listen to them. This is all written very clearly in the Sumerian texts.
Right.
This is not something that people have just made up. What these first priest kings did then, they suddenly owned all the land. Suddenly the people didn't own the land. All that land suddenly belonged to all these first kings, these royal bloodlines. They built their big temples, huge impenetrable temples that they built for themselves so the people couldn't get in there. And from these temples, they started to dispense money. So these first temples became the first banks. And the first money they started to issue from those temples were little clay tablets that were the first forms of money. And those first clay tablets were really exactly the same system that the modern banking system uses today. They were negotiable instruments that consisted of promissory notes, checks, and bills of exchange. That's it. That's a spectacular expose in the Sumerian texts that tell us that the same way that the banking system works today, when I didn't mention this earlier, modern banking system works on these principles. I didn't mention negotiable instruments and bonds and all that.
Right.
So bonds and all those things, those are all fall under the category of negotiable instruments that consist of checks, promissory notes, and bills of exchange. And these first priest kings started to issue these clay tablets some 4,000 years BC, or who knows when. It's very difficult to attach a timeline to this. And they were little clay tablets. And basically they asked people to bring in all their gold. If they had any gold, they weren't allowed to keep the gold. They had to bring it in and give it to the king. And the king in turn would give them a clay tablet that say you've handed in 8 pieces of silver or 2 pieces of gold, and that clay tablet then became the value of 8 pieces of silver or 2 pieces of gold or whatever it was. So those were the very first forms of promissory notes and bills of exchange and negotiable instruments. It's spectacular. So nothing has changed in 6,000 years or more of banking, and the Rothschild banking empire took that philosophy and they just modernized it with very complex rules, regulations, control systems, so they at all times retained control of the supply, the creation and the supply of money, and anyone that got in their way was simply eliminated. And that's what we face today, until Donald J. Trump came along, and he's the first president, first leader since 1760, since that first Rothschild banking empire was launched. He is the first global leader to take that control away from the Rothschild banking empire. It's a spectacular achievement, and I just hope that people that watch this realize how critical this is in all of human history. I'm not just talking about modern or recent history. I'm talking in all of human history.
I have one question. Why don't people take out the Rothschild family? Because they're taking out everybody else. I mean, surely they're not that impenetrable. I can't understand why they're not being taken out.
Now, clearly they have incredible security. That's the first thing. And even if you take them out, they have so much control. They have so many stooges, so many generals, so many lieutenants that keep this empire in control, in power. It's virtually impossible to take them out. But what you can do is you can change the system so that their money and their system has no longer got any effect on us, or has no longer got any control. So you don't have to take them out. All you do is you change the system. This is what when
Trump's
we get
done.
back to the one small town strategy, right?
Yeah. Okay. Now,
And
the one small town strategy. Do you want to discuss that, or should we talk about the issues related to this current lockdown with the coronavirus and stuff like that, and how that's been used to impact people? Which way would you like to go?
well, I think people can go look at our previous video that you and I did,
Yeah.
and they can learn about one small town. I'll just briefly talk about it, and then
Sure.
I think we do need to come back to Corona, the global lockdown, that is an absolute Rothschild move. It's a control, unquestionably a move by the Rothschild global empire, or their puppet masters, or the global elite, whatever you want to call them, to lock down the world and take control of humanity and impose a much more stringent legal system and laws to restrict our rights and human rights, because it's getting out of control. And I think the fact that Trump took control of the Fed may have been one of the contributing factors for this draconian lockdown and the absolute assault on all our liberties
Right.
and freedoms. I just have to mute this for 1 second.
Okay. Well, while that's been
Sorry,
muted. I just
I'm back.
Okay, Michael. I'm just talking to the side chat here. Please, guys, if you've got any questions, throw them into the side chat, and I'll put those to Michael in a short while. For those who are new to this channel, please remember to subscribe to be kept informed. We always have very interesting discussions in the evenings. And Michael, back to you.
Right, so I forgot where we were. Where were we? I forgot.
We were going to be talking about the one small town strategy and then go on
Yes.
to the coronavirus.
Yes. So the one small town strategy is really something that has evolved since 2005, when I discovered this origins of money, the fact that money is just an absolute tool of enslavement that was inserted into humanity to control humanity. And once we realize this, we realize, okay, we need to get away from the system. So we need to create another system. We can't fight it. We can't resist it, because that's old paradigm thinking. Opposition, violence, and conflict has got us nowhere. Look what it's doing to the United States right now. It's just
Right.
atrocious what's happening there. And that is all an attack on Donald Trump, by the way, if people haven't figured this out yet. All of that unrest, the violence, the looting, all that's got nothing to do with peaceful protest. That is the insurgency that's happening through the funded Rothschild insurgency that is trying to take control and destabilize the United States so they can wrestle it back from Donald Trump. And the only way they can wrestle it back from him is letting him lose the election in November. But we'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So we got to create a new system. We can't carry on. Our system is broken. It's controlled. It's a slavery system, but we can't fight it. So the only way we get out of it is by creating a new system that makes this current system obsolete. And that's the incredible and unbelievable beauty of the one small town can change the world strategy, because it takes the power from the top, from the bankers, the governments, the presidents, the Rothschilds, and it takes the people, takes the power down to the people, to the small towns and communities where the majority of the world's population lives in these small towns. Yes, a large number lives in the cities, but that's going to change very quickly once the small towns start to create this autonomy, independence, and incredible wealth and success for themselves. And the one small town model evolved over a 15-year period since 2005, and slowly evolved into realizing that we can't use politics or any of that, that we have to literally take what is being thrown at us, take money, take capitalism, take greed, take the corporate structure, the business, the way that businesses operate, the legal systems, the court systems, and the political system without having to get involved in politics itself. To take all these things that are thrown at us and enslave our lives and keep us enslaved, and use those as tools of liberation. So the slogan has become, we use tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. And this has been evolving so quickly, especially under lockdown. The response to this has been unexpected and unprecedented in the 15 years that I've been working and developing this model.
Right.
That we are very, very close to launching the first one small town. So for people interested in this and that want to follow this, go to onesmalltown.org, sign up, become a member, and start spreading this information and this knowledge. Very simply, we can't fight the system. So what we do, like I said, we use the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. And that is everything: money, legal systems, capitalism, corporate success, etc., and financial success. So we're not creating self-sustaining communities, try and extricate ourselves from this. That's not going to work. So what we do is we find a small town of around 10,000 people or so. That's the model town that we promote. And we find a mayor that has had enough of the hardship and the economic decay in his or her town, that wants to do something good for their community. What we do, we bring in our own supply of electricity. We have brand new technology that we can bring a generator that can power and run that entire town. That electricity now belongs to the people of that town. We're no longer dependent on supply of electricity from some external force, keep paying money every month to somebody that's basically stealing our money from us. We take the right back to generate and provide our own electricity, and that electricity becomes a platform for everything we do in our town and our community. That then spawns, I'm going fast through this because all of this is available on our website,
right,
and in many other interviews. All of this really gives a foundation to bringing in investors and setting up many businesses, from growing food, obviously the cornerstone businesses, to turn that town into a self-sustained community, into a community of prosperity and abundance, from food to technology to healthcare, arts and culture, anything you can imagine. We set up as a business that is co-owned by the community. That means everyone in the community is a co-owner of that business, together with an investor that has come and set up that business. And once you start putting that together, you realize how powerful this is. The only thing that we require from our people in our town is that everybody contributes 3 hours a week towards these businesses. And there's obviously a structure and a way that people are chosen to contribute 3 hours a week, either here or there. We're not stupid. We know how this works. We understand blockchain. We understand systems. We have very clever people that understand how to manage this very effectively,
right,
so that we use the best people in the best situations. If you have a town of 10,000 people, each contributing 3 hours a week, and everybody has got 3 hours a week, you suddenly have a town and a labor force that has 30,000 hours of labor a week. That's 120,000 hours of labor a month. We've just turned our small town into a business that can compete with any major multinational corporation of about 5,000 people. And we can produce, create, manufacture, invent, do anything we choose to do because of our cooperative, collaborative, free labor force. And it all starts with our own supply of electricity and the will of the people to do this. It is so simple and so spectacular that within a very short space of time, our town will become incredibly wealthy in money. So what we're doing here is we're turning our town into a very powerful business that uses the tools of capitalism and the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation, so that our town makes so much money, and all that money is distributed to the people because they're the co-owners of these businesses. And before you know, we have so much money in our town, we don't know what to do with it. The key thing here is that everything we do for ourselves in the one small town is made available for free to everyone in our community, because we treat our community as our family. Right. And when we grow food in the garden for our family, or when we grow food on our small farm or small holding, we don't charge ourselves or our family members for the food. So that's the way we treat the one small town. Everybody contributes a little bit of time and benefits from the immense benefit that the small town and the cooperation of the people creates. It's an incredibly powerful model. We've worked through this over many years now and compared this model to a capitalist model. And no matter which way you put in the numbers, the contributionist model, I call it contributionism, where people contribute their skills and talents for the benefit of everyone in their community. And this one small town, through implementing contributionism, the financial models are unbelievable. If you have accountants or business planners that are watching this, go and do this for yourself and do the numbers. Plug in, put in a model, put in the numbers, right? 1/3 of the profits goes to the investor, 1/3 of the profits is distributed to the people of the town who are co-owners of the businesses, and that's all the businesses that we set up, right? And the final third is used by the municipality or the representative council of the people, which may be the municipality. We don't know how that's going to turn out. That the final third is used for setting up new businesses, new projects, and the maintenance and the upgrade of the existing projects and the town and the beautification and the maintenance of the town. It is a very simple model. It works like clockwork, and you will be astonished to see how much more powerful this model is than any capitalist model that you compare it to.
Right.
The moment this happens, and the first small town creates this platform, just the idea of it sends a quantum a wave of consciousness through the quantum field. And people that understand what I'm talking about will know what I mean. That subconscious thought of the people in that town that this is what we're doing for ourselves actually filters through the morphogenetic field or the quantum field, and it will affect other people, all the people around the world. It's like the 100 monkey syndrome, basically. That's right. The 100 monkey effect. That's what will happen here. And people will see it. They'll see it on YouTube. They'll see it on all the social media, how successful this town is, what we're doing in this town, because the mayor will become the face and the voice of the success and all these projects, all the excitement, anything that's possible that we want to do that's creative and inspirational and inventive and creation, we'll do in our town because we choose to do so. And we have all the money and the funding and the investors to do that. What we found, and I'll end on this, is that in our little trial run that we had with a small town in Canada, North Frontenac, where we did not implement the electricity device, and so it didn't work the way it should. But even in North Frontenac, where Mayor Ron Higgins implemented this, one of the first things that happened, just the thought and the talk of this by Mayor Ron Higgins on Facebook and YouTube, started investors to phone Ron Higgins to say, I love what you're doing in your town, I want to invest in your town. So what we already know from a very small experiment, that investors love this, and they come cold calls to small towns. How many small towns do you know that get unsolicited cold calls from investors that say, I want to invest in your town? Zero. Yeah. Zero small towns.
Now, I've got a couple of questions for you related to this. Bruce Basters has said, would one small town have to pay rates and taxes to the government? And Eric has said, I know of a small town for sale for 5 million rand. So, Jed, over to you.
Yeah, look, I don't have all the answers because we're going to have to figure these answers out once this gets going. So rates and taxes to the government, I guess so. But we also have very smart people that know how to set up corporate structures and non-profit companies and things like that that don't have to pay taxes and so forth. But so again, this is a fluid field. We need to start. We need to start moving towards this and deal with the obstacles and the hurdles as they come. And not allow ourselves to imagine some problems and go, oh, how are we going to overcome that? Oh, it's not going to work. And then, no, that's not going to. We have to do this so that we get ourselves out of this mess.
Right.
The thing is this. The moment the first small town goes, and the people in the neighboring town sees what this town is doing, and how successful and how much more freedom and how much money these people in this town are making, what do you think the people of the small town are going to say over here?
Are
they going to be happy with the way the mayor runs their small town? Of course not.
Yeah.
Right. So what we're doing here, in essence, we using the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. So we're making the town as successful as we can as a corporate structure, and at the same time, we're unleashing the power of the people on the ground, at the ground level. Power of the people in the small towns everywhere. When they see this, they'll suddenly raise their voices and say, "Hey, Mr. Mayor, why aren't you doing what that mayor over there is doing?" And if the mayor doesn't do that, they'll vote the mayor out and they'll vote another mayor in, and everything will go forward. And this is where we have a problem with countries like South Africa, where our mayors are not appointed by the people. Our mayors are appointed by the ruling party. And that's a big problem. But even under those conditions, we have found ways to bypass that and found ways to work with the mayors and work with the community representatives and community councils and the community forums that is making this a very strong possibility.
But
and
Michael,
I believe, as I'm sitting here,
Michael, aren't there some towns in South Africa which have gone beyond administration? Most of the towns in South Africa are now under administration because they're bankrupt. And you've got communities who've actually set up through the courts a different form of control where they are now actually controlling those towns. So that takes the ANC right out of the picture.
Yeah, this is a big opportunity for us, and this is why there's never been a time like now. It's really important for South Africans to recognize this. We have by the end of this week, we might be in a very different situation than we are right now while I'm speaking to you. There have been a number of millionaires and billionaires that have reached out to me over this lockdown, and there's a lot of interest in funding this. So we're making great progress, but that's as much as I'm going to say right now.
Right.
Because it's very exciting. This has been evolving over 15 years, and in a strange way, weird, twisted way, it was this attack on all of humanity through this draconian, totalitarian lockdown.
Tell us about this.
Upon us.
Tell us about this.
Yeah. That this one small town strategy is suddenly reaching millions of people around the world, and they're realizing that this is actually a very beautiful, simple, elegant way to get us out of the slavery system without any violence, opposition, or conflict.
Right.
And before we realize, we will create a new system that makes this system obsolete. And that's the beauty of it. So there's a lot of traction, a lot of excitement going on right now.
Now, Bruce has asked another related question, and as this is related to the small town, I just want to run it past you. Bruce says, if I can ask another question, if 1/3 of the profits go to the investor, are you not just recreating the existing banking system of the rich getting richer and controlling everything?
No, not at all. Without hijacking this time now, because we don't have much time left, I think I'll explain it. The rich, there's only so much opportunity for investors in these small towns. So let me just paint this picture for you. First of all, we don't possibly even need investors, okay? Just keep this in mind. The moment we implement our own source of electricity, and the money we pay every month towards the electricity stays in our town, we are in effect funding the success of our own community by paying for our own electricity, and that money doesn't disappear to Eskom and some offshore shareholders.
Right.
Now, in a small town of 10,000 people, and everybody pays 1,000 Rand a month electricity, I'm using a round number, that's 10 million Rand a month. That's a huge amount of money for a small town.
Right.
And in dollar terms, if you've got a town of 10,000 people and everybody pays $100 a month, that's $1 million a month. That now stays in that town, that the people of the town and the mayor and the council, on behalf of the people, has to do something with that money, because that money belongs to the people. So they have to do something for the community with that money. They can't just use it, waste it. That's the beauty of this. The only reason we are putting the electricity device into these towns, and in fact we are giving this electricity device to these small towns and the mayors of these towns, they just have to pay it off, and it's not that expensive. I'm not going to go into the money of that now, but it's not that expensive. They'll probably pay it off within 2 or 3 years.
Right. Now let's.
And once they've paid it off, it belongs to that community in perpetuity.
Yeah. Now let's get back to the coronavirus and this lockdown, because this is a huge issue, and it's a subject I know we need to talk about. So back to you.
Well, look, the coronavirus is clearly it's a huge discussion. Just saying it's a virus already raises a lot of questions, and anyone that's done their research will know what I'm talking about. It may turn out not to even be a virus. It might have been detected and called a virus, but it may actually not even be a virus. It might actually be something that our bodies excrete when our bodies come under attack from external forces, and our cells are attacked by external forces, frequencies, and dis-ease that cause our bodies and the cells in our bodies to
Adapt.
excrete these things called lysosomes. And if you look at what a lysosome looks like and what the image of a coronavirus looks like, I mean, it's crazy. They look identical.
Now,
Lysosomes are really these little things that are excreted from cells when they're under attack.
Because of because of time constraints, let's talk about why the New World Order are doing this lockdown, because I mean that's really we can debate the other subject, but let's understand what the motive is. Look,
the final motive for this by the global elite remains a mysterious one, and I think it's just a test. I think it was really a test to see how far they can push humanity, how far they can push people to completely degrade them, to reduce the sense of self-worth, the self-image, by making people walk around with masks and fearful of each other, and start ratting on each other and spying on each other, whether they're wearing masks or whether they're keeping 6 feet apart, and all this disgusting kind of behavior. And they're literally turning people into spies on each other and turning people against each other.
Shocking.
So it's really destroying the fabric of society and destroying the fabric of human nature by putting all these disgusting laws that have got nothing to do with science or our health or well-being. It's just a complete and utter control mechanism. When we know that cures for all disease are available, we can cure any disease you want. And especially this virus, it's obviously very clear to most people that hydroxychloroquine has been the drug of choice, even from Donald Trump to many hospitals and doctors all over the world have reported thousands of times how they've treated successfully patients and people, even people that were very, very seriously ill and they thought they were going to die. Upon treatment with hydroxychloroquine, they saved those people and they actually rescued them. So it's not only a treatment, it's also a preventative and a prophylactic. So the whole thing about curing this virus, and the fact that it is not in question anymore, we can cure it. The fact that the CDC about a week ago now released the latest research is that the virus is not deadly. In fact, it's much less deadly than we thought it was. And I think some of the quotes that they put out there is that if you're a healthy adult below the age of 40, you have less chance of dying from corona than you have of being struck by lightning or dying in a car accident.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. So this information is out there now, and yet our governments keep all these restrictions. They keep us walking around with stupid masks on, actually, which is more dangerous because you're breathing your own germs and things that your body is trying to expel. The air that your body is expelling, you're breathing back in. That's not what you should be doing. That's going against nature. And basically telling us, the CDC telling us that that the virus is not dangerous, that it's not as contagious as we thought it was, and suddenly everything changed within 24 hours from one day to the next.
Well,
the governments have not caught up.
I have to say that the lockdown is a complete scam. All it's doing is destroying the economy of countries. Now,
Yes.
I want to get on to the questions, because I've got a bunch here for you, and we've got half an hour to go. Alunchi says, do the Rothschilds control the Freemasons?
Big question. It all depends how you look at it. I think that there have been many Freemasons that have broken away from the Rothschilds, and they've set up countries. Like if you look at the United States, they were set up by Freemasons, and yet they stand opposed to the Rothschilds. All the wars in America were fought by the founding fathers in the USA,
Right.
Against the Rothschilds. So it's an interesting question, and I'm not sure if anyone has actually got a clear-cut answer for that. All kinds of people claim this about the Freemasons and that about the Freemasons. What I do know is that about the Freemasons is that they have a lot of ancient knowledge and a lot of ancient information that is dangerous to the Rothschild Empire.
Right. Okay, now Hank Talyard has asked, please ask Michael his input on GESARA, the Global Economic Security and Recovery Act.
Yeah, again, it is something that I've heard of. I've read as much about it as I could, and then I lost interest in it because I thought, okay, well, this is just another thing it's thrown at us. If it is something that is in effect right now, that's fantastic, but we certainly don't know about it. They're not giving us clues to tell us what's going on, because majority of the world is completely in the dark. As you said quite rightly, Scott, this attack on our liberties, using the virus as a tool to lock us down, is absolutely to destroy our country's economies, to destroy our lives, our businesses, our livelihoods, to make us dependent on a government that is now going to be borrowing money from the central banks, so that we indebt ourselves and enslave ourselves even more to the central banks. It is a complete and utter chess move. It's like a checkmate move to corner humanity into more debt, more slavery, more obedience, more draconian rules, and it's just crazy. So it's failing, and what's happening in the USA is a critical move, and I just really want people to think about it. And there's so many people that just have this inert hatred for Trump. And I didn't like Trump when I first saw him running for president of the USA. I thought he was just a greedy capitalist, until I started to read between the lines. And when Hillary Clinton lost, when he won, and suddenly something shifted, and that's when the media attack started on him. And understanding who the media are, who owns them, I went, why is the media going after Trump like this? It's like a bunch of rabid dogs trying to rip the guy apart.
Yeah.
And you realize, okay, hold on. He is the threat. So, right now, what is happening in the USA is that the insurgents, the infiltrators that are destabilizing the country in every possible way with these riots and all that kind of stuff, are the guys that have successfully brought down all other regimes of the past 250 years, so that they've kept the control of the governments and the countries under the central banks and the Rothschild banking empire. That's why we have this global banking system, because they control it. Donald Trump is now the threat to completely and utterly undo that. He's already done that by taking control of the Federal Reserve Bank. He has shown the way to all other leaders of the world what to do. And if he succeeds, which we believe he will, to win the election, we believe that he's got all the tools necessary in his toolkit to do that, and growing support by the looks of it. And the media is doing everything they can on a daily basis to just paint him with the most disgusting brushes that you can imagine. I believe that that's the end of the cabal, the end of the Rothschild empire, because the moment he wins the election, all the other governments of the world are going to be forced to do what Donald Trump did, unless they all pull together, which, you never know how these Rothschild, how devious they are. Unless many of the other governments pull together and they attack the United States to try and topple Trump to reinstate their central bank there, because that's what it's all about.
Well, I have to say that I find it quite extraordinary that the Rothschilds have an office in Johannesburg, and the guy who's now running their office in Johannesburg was the finance minister in South Africa. He's a past
Yeah.
finance minister, and it gives you a clear indication as to how government is tied up with that family, even in South Africa. And
Oh yeah, are you talking about Trevor Manuel?
yeah,
Yeah.
now
Yeah, it's crazy. When I heard Trevor Manuel was leaving as the finance minister, and he was now suddenly the representative of the Rothschilds in South Africa, I said, okay, you see, this is exactly what they do and how they do it.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Now, Richard Kingsley's asked, is there a one small town in the pipeline for South Africa, and if so, where?
The answer to that is absolutely. There are as many one small towns in the pipeline for South Africa as we can initiate. All we need is a willing mayor,
Well,
or a willing community forum.
I have to tell you, there's one town that I think could grab this idea. I lived in a place called Greytown, which is in the northern part of KwaZulu-Natal. Now, when my mother was the PA to the mayor, this is back in the 1970s, she told me that the reason we paid so low rates, we paid practically nothing in rates, was because the town owned a lot of the land around where people lived, and they'd planted that with pine trees, and they got such a huge income from these pine trees that the rates were very low because of the income from the pine trees. Now, that's the sort of town that would be a perfect starting point for something like this, where they have got a good income coming in.
Yeah. You know, Scott, you just identified one of the cornerstone businesses that one small town would look at, right? And you just identified that industry for Greytown. But any town, anywhere, is perfect for this.
Yeah.
The only thing we need is a mayor that wants to do it, and a mayor that's not scared of the government, or not scared of being fired, or a mayor that is put under pressure by the people, or a mayor that realizes that he can't salvage the situation because they owe Eskom 300 million rand, and there's no way they're ever going to repay it. By initiating the one small town strategy, the mayor pretty much brings salvation and a solution to that town's problems, all its problems, because suddenly you'll have a funding mechanism to pay back Eskom, or become strong enough to tell Eskom to take a hike. We're not paying you back. Sue us if you want. I mean, that's also possible. Once you have your own supply of electricity, you can do anything you want. You don't have to pay them back. They're a bunch of sharks that have extorted us for long enough. I'm not telling people to break the law here, but I'm telling people that there are legal ways out of this. And we have very smart lawyers and people that understand legislation and our rights that will find ways of stringing Eskom along for the next 100 years to pay them back, or something stupid. You know, we use the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. We also have lawyers. We're also smart. We know how to work the financial and monetary systems. We know how to work the courts. We know how to maneuver and hide things that have been used against us. We're not stupid.
Yeah. Now, look, I have to just, while I'm thinking about it, have to say something which completely supports what you're saying when you say the Rothschilds don't actually own any money. It's all just a digital number on a computer screen. Because when it comes to countries in Africa a few years ago, their debt was just suddenly forgiven like that, you know. And these Rothschild guys, all they did was they just removed that from their computer, didn't cost them a cent. And this brings me to the actual ruthless nature of this family. You know, you take farmers in South Africa who are battling because of years of drought, and the banks, which are basically controlled by the Rothschilds, they foreclose these farmers, take their farms off them, sell them for next to nothing to someone else, and with expropriation without compensation, if that goes through, the person who owned that property before it was taken off them is still labored with the debt, and the banks are going to be trying to enforce that debt on that person, even though their property has been taken from them. This is the two sides of the same family, the Rothschild family. You know, they forgive debt, but guess what? There's a huge price that's got to be paid by that nation, because they will want a lot from that nation, although the money doesn't even exist. The whole thing is a complete scam.
Yeah. And this is why once people realize the beauty of the one small town strategy, it is just, it's unbelievable that it has landed in our lap. It's evolved over 15 years and it's now in its fully evolved state, and it's there for all of us to use. And it's just spectacular how powerful it is. I always say that every problem that we face as the human race, every imaginable problem, has a solution that's already built into the one small town model.
Right.
And I've been doing this for many years, so I can say it with absolute confidence. I've faced thousands and thousands of people in my lectures around the world since 2010, and before that in South Africa, before I started to travel the world, from 2007 in South Africa, and then since then traveling more than 30 countries, doing lectures in more than 300 cities around the world on this specific subject, together with all the other subjects of ancient civilizations and nature, reality, and all the things that are connected. So I know how the people respond to this, and it's incredible how the collective consciousness has evolved from where it was 12 years ago to where it is today, where suddenly today now people in their thousands and millions right now, because more than 40 million or 50 million people now have seen my videos, have seen the one small town idea and strategy. So now there's I guess a critical mass of consciousness that is of this idea that's already feeding into the morphogenetic field. And suddenly people everywhere, when they see this idea, they are far more attracted to it than they were even 2 years ago.
Right. Now, Little Dot has asked Michael if he knows anything about the War Castle and quantum grammar. Commander-in-Chief of the United States, Russell J. Gold. Now, I don't know anything about that. I'm just putting it to you.
If you're talking about quantum grammar, as in using the language in its the different I forget the words now. Using the syntax and the true meaning of the words and the way the English words are being structured to cast spells and actually keep us in a state of spell and some sort of a spell, and then how to use the words to affect change and so forth. There's a guy called David Wynn Miller that does an incredible job on this, and I recommend that you go and find his videos on YouTube, David Wynn Miller.
Yeah.
It really breaks the English language down and how completely and utterly it's encoded with the most unimaginable things. And this is when you get to that level and that depth, you realize how far back this control system over humanity goes and how little we know. We literally, our babies are waking up from a deep sleep. We know nothing about what's been going on around us, how we've been enslaved, manipulated, controlled, and lied to over and over and over again for so long that we can't recognize the truth when the truth is actually presented to us. So if that is the quantum grammar that the person is talking about, then yes, I know quite a bit about it. I wrote several chapters on it in my book, Ubuntu book, on exactly that subject.
Okay. Now, Property Power, and there are a couple of questions here related to this. Property Power said, can you ask Michael what he thinks of the story that Queen Elizabeth is not really the true ruler? There is a man who is the real king. Now, I've seen that on YouTube floating around, and I don't know. But I did also hear that Queen Victoria is apparently descended from the Rothschilds. Now, I don't know if you've heard those two conspiracies, but over to you.
Let's put it this way. Whether Queen Elizabeth, whether she is the rightful or not rightful monarch, it doesn't really matter. She's the one that controls the world right now with the Rothschilds. They're together in this. They run the world. Again, with the exception of China and Russia, that those are two very special and very different entities. And I know this because my insider contact at the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, that is by the way, we didn't really talk about that, but the BIS in Basel, Switzerland, that round building, that is the building where all the central banks of the world are controlled from there. Right. So that's where they get the instructions from, the BIS, Bank for International Settlements. And the information I got from an insider there is that China and Russia do not play along with the Rothschild banking empire at all. Russia a little bit, but China very little. They do submit documents if and when they feel like it, and so does Russia. But unfortunately, the Rothschilds can't collapse those economies because that'll destroy the grip on the rest of the world. So they have to keep them in the game without destroying them, and that's a very important,
Right.
very important piece of that puzzle. And I forgot what the question was. I think I got off the track a little bit.
This guy from Australia who's laid claim to the crown.
The Queen.
Yeah.
So the Queen is in charge. So until she's replaced by another queen or a king, it's the same bloodline family. The Rothschilds clearly are of royal bloodline descent. You can go and have a look at that, and this is why it's inextricably connected, and they're not overthrown, and the monarch, the queen, keeps them in control to run the global banking empire and the largest organized crime syndicate that the world has ever had.
All right. Now, the question was actually, is that there's a claim that there's a man from Australia who's laid claim to the crown of England. Have you heard about that?
Yes, I saw that just the other day, strangely enough, and that's fine. He can lay claim to the crown of England.
But he's never going to get it.
It's like, he's not going to get it. It's just like, they make the rules. They've made the rules. They've controlled the rules. And those that are in charge remain in charge until you create a situation and a system that makes the current system obsolete. And please pay attention very, very carefully. The one small town is that system that makes the system obsolete by using the tools of the system, not fighting or opposing the tools of the system. We're not going to fight the Queen or trying to oppose the Queen or trying to oppose the Rothschilds and that. No, we're actually going to take all that stuff they're throwing at us and using it to create a one small town system. And once there are 10,000 or 20,000 or 100,000 small towns around the world, we have taken the power away from them. We've created a new system that makes this system obsolete.
Right. Okay. Now, Marcus Hull has said, please ask Michael who actually won World War II.
I don't think World War II has ever won. I mean, it's, the same powers that
behind the scenes, pulling
II.
the strings.
Controlling the world today. The same guys that started World War II are controlling the world today. The Rothschilds started World War II. They funded both sides. And so no one won the war. I mean, they're the threat. Hitler was a huge threat to the Rothschild Empire. I mean, that's a name that we often forget, and I often don't mention Hitler in the group of people that have actually resisted the Rothschilds and successfully beaten the Rothschilds, because he comes with stigma and this whole baggage that comes around Hitler. But think of whatever you want about him. He very successfully defeated the Rothschilds. He made Germany the most prosperous country in the world within 4 years.
Right.
It's unimaginable. From the poorest country in the world after the First World War to the wealthiest country in the world, most successful country in the world, within 4 years of taking control of Germany. And he basically shut out the Rothschilds from Germany. He took control of the finances and the way that they controlled their money. He did trade deals with something like 30 or 40 countries around the world where the Rothschilds did not have control over those trade exchanges. He hijacked the banking and the trade industry from the Rothschilds right under their noses. Wow. That's why they had to get rid of him, and they threw everything at him.
We're going to have to be careful on this subject because YouTube likes to shaft my videos. So I think we'll drop that particular subject because it.
No, we'll drop it. But I'm just saying that Hitler did successfully.
Yeah, I get it.
Bankers.
I get it. I just know YouTube, and this video is too important to be taken down. So I just now Lawrence Hansen has said, please ask Michael how does his small town philosophy compare to Atlas Shrugged by Ayn Rand.
I don't know that. I know the name, but I don't know much about Atlas Shrugged.
Okay.
So, let me just tell you that any sustainable community, like whether it's Oroville, whether it's Damanhur, whether it's Esselen, all these famous self-sustained communities that you find around the world, that's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about anything like that. We're talking about using the existing structures with a mayor, with infrastructure, with a town, with the electricity grid, with the sewage grid, with the waters, the factories, the farms. Everything is already there. You don't have to create or build anything. All you got to do is change the way the people think and the way they interact and the way they do business and the way we grow food, invent stuff and do stuff together, and not oppose each other and not compete against each other, but work together in the small town as one would in a large corporation for the benefit of that corporation.
Right.
That's really what we're doing. Yeah.
Now, look, there's a lot of discussion here about the Bilderberg Group, so I'm just going to give you this one question from Amelia's Eyebrows. Now, that's an interesting username, but anyway. Amelia says, what about the Bilderberg Group? Will Trump dissolve the Bilderberg as well? Will criminals hang?
I don't know what Trump's going to do. I trust he's got some really interesting plans, because every move he's made so far has been unbelievable. I could not have predicted it. Nobody could have predicted it. And I just wish him the greatest luck. Think of him what you want. He is the only guy, the lone voice that has taken on the Rothschilds, and he's busy beating them. That's why they're throwing everything possible at him to try and bring him down and beat him. It's incredible. So the Bilderbergers, I think, will just dissolve automatically. My feeling is that they will dissolve, and once again, one small town will be one of the things that, once we have thousands of small towns doing this around the world, it'll break down all those global control movements and systems and organizations completely and utterly. Keep in mind that in our small town, we will be curing all disease, cancer, anything you can imagine. We will have technology that doesn't exist at the moment. Levitation technology, all free electricity, which is already what we're bringing to that town to start off with.
Right.
We'll have new inventions in technology and healing that does not exist in the world today. So how could you ever possibly want to go back to the world or to the system that the Bilderbergers were trying to shove down our throats? That's never going to happen. Once the people smell and feel and taste or even sniff the possibility of this kind of small town where all these things are possible, where we encourage new invention, new creation, new innovation, new technology, new materials, new healing, there's no way that anyone's ever going to go back to where we came from.
Right. Now, we got two more questions to go. I'm kind of limiting this because we got another 10 minutes before we got to close off. John Smith says, what is the max population of a small town?
A very good question. Thank you, John. So the original population was put out at about, or estimated about 5,000 people. And the reason for that is that the participation of 3 hours a week is not compulsory. Okay, keep in mind, this is why it's such a beautiful system. It's fully inclusive. It embraces everyone and anyone, whether you participate or not, right? So those people that participate in the businesses and the projects that we launch as community-driven businesses / projects, those people benefit from those projects, and it's voluntary. Okay, they'll be put to work 3 hours a week where we need them, and those people that don't want to do it don't have to. They carry on with their lives, they carry on paying the electricity, they keep paying for everything, while those that contribute start to get the benefits of whatever we do, whether it's growing food or technology or healthcare. So very quickly, those people that don't participate will see the benefits, and they'll probably won't sit on the fence for too long when they start seeing, if 3 hours a week, get all these benefits. So we estimated that 5,000 strong town would probably be the smallest town possible, because if, say, only 10% of the people decide to participate, it still gives us enough people, 500 people every week. 10% of 5,000 is 500. 500 people every week that contribute 3 hours. So that's still a large enough labor force to make an impact on that one small town success, so that it shows that it, and has enough labor force and that free labor that we contribute to the success of our town. And so 5,000 is the smallest number, but it can go up to I think the last video I put out, I said up to 200,000 people, because I think that's still manageable, but anything after that starts to get too big and too cumbersome. And this will hopefully will, once this starts to go, and I feel we're very, very close now. I've been saying this for the last 5 years, the last 3 years actually. since 2016, 4 years. We're very, very close. And today we are much closer than we were at any stage before. Once it goes, the first town will be a great example, and we'll learn so much from that first one, and the next one will learn from the mistakes of this one, and so forth. It's just going to get better and better and better
now,
as this thing grows.
You set out what One Small Town is all about on the website onesmalltown.org. So anyone who wants information, they can just go there. Okay, guys, onesmalltown.org. There you'll get all the info you need on that. Now, Michael Janks has asked, please ask Michael if there is a full process policy or prospectus to follow, and I definitely would campaign.
Yes, please go onto the Ubuntu Planet website or the onesmalltown.org. It all ends up in the same website. So let me just make this also clear. The website is called ubuntucontributionism.org, because our previous website, Ubuntu Planet, was hacked, and we had to take it down and create a new website, a new URL. But it all leads to ubuntuplanet.org or Ubuntu Contributionism, and onesmalltown.org all ends at our URL. And on the homepage, you'll go down, scroll down, and you'll see there are documents that you can click onto to get all the documents. The letter to the mayor, the proposal to the mayor. There's also a section that you get all the letters, the manifesto, and what to do, what not to do. Please read all those documents. And then if you want to start campaigning or promoting the One Small Town in your country or wherever you are, then contact me, but only once you've read all that. Please don't contact me and ask me questions, because I'm just going to point you back at those documents, because I can't answer individual questions to 200 people every week or 1,000 people every week, because that's how busy our email is right now.
Okay, I just have to address the side chat very quickly. Look, Michelle, you won't hear from Ari Goldman again. I've just hidden him from the channel. And with where's it, Darlene? Darlene, I think we did answer your question, because that was about whether the Queen, or there was a guy in Australia who should be the king and not the Queen. We did actually discuss that subject. Okay. Yeah. So sorry, carry on, Michael.
I forgot what I was saying.
Okay.
I got so involved in what you were saying that I forgot what I was talking about.
Oh, we had a troll on here. Okay, Property Powers asked, isn't the small town setup not actually a bigger kibbutz setup? How will the people earn an income for themselves?
It is very similar. The closest example to this actually is a kibbutz. But unfortunately, the kibbutz, as you know, is not a success. It has not affected the world because it's not a town. So, first of all, people that live in towns have jobs. They work. People work in shops, in banks, in mines, on the roads. People have jobs, right? So they're not going to stop and suddenly get involved in one small town. No, this is why it's such an elegant and a beautiful, smooth transition. No one is expected to leave their job or jump into the deep end and worry about survival. No, not at all.
Right.
It's a slow, very smooth transition. All you got to do is contribute 3 hours a week to one of the businesses and community projects that is launched. What it will do is the more businesses stroke community projects that are co-owned by the people are launched in our town, the more business opportunity and work opportunity it'll provide for the people in our town. So, and then also we start distributing the money from the businesses to the people every month. And people will start earning more and more money every month from all the successful businesses that we've launched. And there'll come a time that they're earning more money or as much money from their monthly distribution of the small town businesses and projects than they're getting at their job.
Now,
and all they have to do is contribute 3 hours a week.
Yeah.
And they get as much money as they get for working 8 hours a day or 10 hours a day. Well, what are you going to choose?
I have a suggestion for you. Okay, I'll tell you, back in the 1990s, I approached Rottnest Island, which is in Western Australia, and it's a huge tourist attraction. And they've got about 10 trading businesses on the actual island, mainly fast food. People stay there. It's just like a little, beautiful little island. It's like one small town. And I approached the West Australian government with the idea of producing token coins that would be used in this community on Rottnest Island. And we had the coins designed, we had everything ready to go, and there was one trader who said no. And because it was a collective thing, it didn't happen. But wouldn't it be fantastic if these small towns had their own token coins, rather like the Ora in Orania?
That is a frequently asked question, and the answer to that is an absolutely no. Okay, absolutely not. And again, this is the lesson that we've learned through 15 years of going through this.
Okay.
We have to use the tools of enslavement as tools of liberation. And the number one tool of enslavement is money. The current Rothschild created money. The moment we create any form of money, any other alternative currency, even if it's Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency or any other coin or anything, these guys have a way that they can implement laws or legislation or an act or a bill that'll say, oh, as of tomorrow, Bitcoin is unlawful and illegal. No one is allowed to trade Bitcoin.
Yeah, gotcha.
That's it.
No.
But they can't say, oh, as of tomorrow, the dollar is unlawful. No.
Okay. Now,
see, this is...
We're on the cusp of 2 hours, so I'm going to stick to my word and I'm going to say, Michael, it's been absolutely fantastic talking to you tonight. I think people have learned a lot about fiat currency and fiat money. Is there something you'd like to share with those watching now or those who might watch later?
Yes. Once again, thank you very much, Scott, for the great shows that you do, and thanks for all the people that have tuned in. First thing is knowledge is power. Learn, inform yourself. Learn about this horrible, what I call the terrible truth or the dark truth and the dark secrets of our past that have been hidden from us. And don't be fearful of it. Don't let it depress you. Use it as a platform of knowledge to inspire you as what not to do, where we've come from. We've come from those terrible dark ages of abuse, of slavery. We're now sitting at an absolutely critical moment in all of human history, where we have a choice and we have a very simple plan of action to take us out of the slavery. We have the leader of the largest economy in the world that has currently neutralized the effect of the Rothschilds in the USA. That can spread to many other countries. If that does, that'll become a springboard for the rest of the world. We have the most greatest and most brightest days ahead of us. It all depends on us, what we do. One small town can change the world, and one small town will change the world. So much is happening on that front. Go and become a member of the Ubuntu movement. You don't have to become a member, just sign up to the newsletter and read all the material of One Small Town, absorb yourself in it, really get to know it, and then share that knowledge and information with everyone. Because we're going to plant a seed of consciousness and create a critical mass of conscious, aware people of one small town. Once that critical mass is reached, it becomes unstoppable. And once the first small town gets off the ground, it becomes unstoppable. No government, no army, no one will be able to stop it. So we have a solution, very beautiful, elegant, simple solution without any violence, opposition, or conflict. We create a new system that makes the current slavery system obsolete. That's the message I'd like to leave with you. Fantastic.
Now, just in closing, guys, I just want to first of all thank our fantastic moderators who always keep an eye on stuff. And if you just alert me to any trolls, I'll certainly make sure that they're no longer an issue. And for all those people who've joined us tonight, thank you for being part of the conversation. I've learnt a lot, especially about this one small town. I think it's a fantastic idea. But look, guys, please share this video with your friends. It'll be on the main Loving Life channel, so that people can just take the link and go and view it. And thank you for being part of the live stream tonight. And finally, to our guest, Michael. Michael, thank you so much. Lovely to have you on again. And I did say we'd keep it to 2 hours. I think we could have going for about 6 hours, but we'll have to get you on again sometime to discuss some of the other stuff.
Yeah, thank you very much, Scott. Keep up the great work. Keep informing and educating the people. Send lots of love and prosperity to everyone. bright light at the end of this tunnel. Can't wait to see how this all unfolds. Very excited about the future.
Fantastic. All right, guys, I'm going to shut down the live stream now. Please take care and be safe. Bye for now.